Welcome to the deep dive, right? Where we really unpack these complex topics and, dig up those hidden details you just don't find anywhere else.
We're all about connecting the dots, seeing that bigger picture, understanding what it all means.
And today, we're doing exactly that with the wild story of Paul Whelan. Remember him? That American guy, wrongfully detained in Russia. Forever. 5 years.
Yeah, his story captivated everyone, sparked so much outrage, and it really made everyone think about, this whole hostage diplomacy thing. It's scary stuff.
Totally. So we're going super deep into his experience, right? We've got articles, interviews, even his Wikipedia page to figure out what went down and, more importantly, how and why.
Because this isn't just about one guy's horrible experience, right?
Yeah.
It's like a peephole into this whole world of international relations, like the moral quandaries when it comes to these prisoner swaps, and the huge impact it has on people stuck in the middle of it all.
Okay, so rewind with me to December 2018. Paul Whelan, former Marine, loves to travel. He's in Moscow, right? For a friend's wedding.
Seems like a normal trip, right? Until it takes this crazy turn, he gets arrested, bam, by Russian authorities.
And get this. Russia says he's a spy, a high-level spy. But the U.S. is like, nope, not buying it. Called it a total fabrication and the start of this awful ordeal.
And the thing is, even back then, Whelan himself said the Russians, they didn't even try to hide why they were really holding him.
Really? How so?
They basically told him straight up, you're leverage, dude. A bargaining chip in this whole bigger game they were playing.
No way, they just came out and said it.
That's what Whelan says. And it's happening more and more. Governments using people like pawns to pressure each other, get concessions, settle scores.
So from the get-go, this wasn't about Whelan at all. It was all a big message, huh?
Exactly. And it really makes you think, ethically, legally, it's so messed up. Is it diplomacy? Espionage? Straight up hostage taking?
It's terrifying to think that someone can be plucked out of their life, accused of something insane, and held hostage for some political game.
It really is. And it just shows how fragile freedom really is, especially as this stuff becomes more common,
Now, we know from sources like CBS News that while he was imprisoned, Whelan actually connected with another American, Trevor Reed, another former Marine.
Think about that for a second. 2 former Marines stuck in different Russian prisons, and they find a way to talk to each other.
It's crazy. Like something out of a movie. How did they even do that?
Through this underground network of prisoners, right?
Yeah.
Sharing news, supporting each other, staying connected to the outside world.
So not only are they dealing with these unimaginable conditions, they're also wrapped up in this secret network inside prison.
Exactly. We don't know all the details, but it says a lot about their resilience, their determination to survive, and the weird connections you make when times are tough.
It's like, how widespread are these networks, really?
Yeah.
Makes you think about the lengths people go to when they need to connect with another human being, especially in these crazy isolating situations.
Yeah. Absolutely. It shows you that even in the worst situations, people find a way. It's kind of remarkable, right?
Totally. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Fast forward to 2022. The world's freaking out about Russia invading Ukraine, and Paul Whelan, still stuck in this Russian prison system?
Yeah, and things get even worse. He's sent to a labor camp, and suddenly he's seeing the war's impact firsthand, not just out in the world, but right there inside the prison, too.
What do you mean? How did the war change things inside?
Well, remember the Wagner Group, the private military company, super involved in the Ukraine fight.
Yeah, the mercenary group.
Yeah.
Brutal reputation.
Exactly. So Whelan sees firsthand how they're using the war to their advantage. Hundreds of prisoners, his fellow prisoners, some therefore minor stuff, they're recruited by Wagner, promised freedom, riches, if they go fight in Ukraine.
Wow. So basically using the war as an excuse to get more soldiers, forced recruits.
You got it. And for a lot of these guys, it was a one-way ticket, right? Thrown into a horrific war with almost no training, no support. A lot of them, they never came back.
That's just awful. Talk about being caught in the crossfire.
It's a prime example of how these huge global events, they have very real and often devastating consequences, especially for people like Whelan who are just stuck in the middle.
Totally. His experience, it's like this glimpse into a side of the war you don't often hear about, the human cost. Beyond the politics, beyond the headlines.
Absolutely. It reminds us that these aren't just events on a map. These are real people's lives.
100%. It's easy to get caught up in all the political analysis and forget that at the heart of it all, it's human beings who are suffering.
It's so important to remember that.
Okay, so we've got Whelan, this former Marine, wrongly imprisoned, navigating a secret prisoner network. and witnessing the far-reaching effects of a war he never asked to be a part of.
And if you think that's wild, there's another layer to the story we have to get into.
Yeah, let's get into it. This is where things get really shady, right? This whole thing about the friend whose wedding Whelan was attending when he was arrested.
Right. Remember how we talked about people exploiting personal connections in these situations? This is exactly what I'm talking about.
This wasn't just any friend's wedding either, right? Reports from the BBC, they said this friend had direct ties to the FSB, Russian intelligence.
And not just some random connection either. This friend, Ilya Yatsenko, he reportedly had access to some seriously sensitive information. It's very possible he was working directly with Russian intelligence.
Which begs the question, was Whelan set up this whole time?
That's exactly what Whelan believes. He said that right before his arrest, Yatsenko, the friend, handed him a USB drive.
And that's the same USB drive the FSB said was full of street secrets.
The one and only. Whelan always said he thought it was just, photos, videos, nothing important.
So either a huge misunderstanding or a very elaborate setup.
And given everything else, and knowing the FSB's history, it's hard not to be a little suspicious, right?
Totally. It adds a whole other level of crazy to an already insane story.
It makes you wonder about everything, their relationship, what led up to that trip. Was Whelan a target from the beginning?
Makes you question everything.
For sure. And it shows you how far governments will go in these situations, using friendships, trust, anything they can to get what they want.
It's a scary thought, In this world of spies and political games, you can't trust anyone, and things are rarely what they seem.
Makes you think twice, right?
Let's dig a little deeper into those spying accusations. Russia was very specific, claiming Whelan wasn't just any spy, but a high-ranking official in the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency.
Big claims. And former CIA officers, even Whelan himself, they've all said it's ridiculous, completely made up.
So why would Russia say something so obviously false?
Many experts believe it was strategic. By making Whelan seem like a bigger deal, they were trying to up his value as a bargaining chip.
You mean make him seem like a more enticing prize and a potential swap?
You got it. This is Russia we're talking about. They're known for their intelligence operations, and they're not afraid to play dirty.
So they hit him with this bogus charge, hoping to force the U.S.'s hand in negotiations.
Classic hostage diplomacy. You take a citizen from another country, often on fake charges, and you hold them hostage to squeeze concessions out of their government.
And as we've seen, it sadly works a lot of the time.
Right. It puts immense pressure on that person's home country. It's like, do you stick to your principles or do you bring your people home? It's a terrible choice.
Lose-lose situation. You give in to their demands and encourage this behavior, or you risk your own citizens' lives.
It's a moral and political nightmare, really.
And through all of this, Paul Whelan is stuck in the middle, his life on hold, just waiting to see what happens.
It's crucial to remember that through all of this, Whelan wasn't alone. Back home, his family became incredible advocates, fighting tirelessly to keep his story alive and pressure the U.S. government to get him back.
Oh yeah, his family, especially his twin brother David, they are constantly in the news, giving interviews, drumming up support.
They were relentless, and it was huge for keeping his story in the public eye, putting pressure on both the U.S. and Russia to do something.
His brother, David, went above and beyond, sending emails to journalists constantly with updates on Paul, making sure he was never forgotten.
Really smart move, using the media to apply pressure and keep Paul's case front and center.
It's a testament to the power of family. Their love and dedication to bringing Paul home was incredible.
For sure. Just knowing they were out there fighting for him must have given Paul hope during those dark years.
But even with their dedication, all the media attention, Whelan's case just dragged on and on.
And during that time, there were a few high-profile prisoner exchanges between the U.S. and Russia.
And every single time, Paul Whelan's name wasn't on the list.
Can you imagine how agonizing that must have been, to be so close to freedom, only to have it ripped away over and over again?
Seeing other people go free while you're still stuck?
It takes incredible strength to hold on to hope in that situation.
It really does. It's another reminder of the human cost in these political standoffs.
The not knowing, the dashed hopes, the feeling of being forgotten.
It's a lot to handle.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, during all this time, Whelan was still living the reality of being imprisoned in Russia.
Yeah. He was first at Lefortovo prison, known for its bright lights, psychological games. Then a brutal labor camp, spending years of his life making winter coats. Can you imagine?
It's worlds away from the life he once knew, the freedom he had.
His family said it took a huge toll on his physical and mental health. He lost a ton of weight, And who knows what else.
Exactly, and that's not even considering the mental and emotional impact of being wrongfully imprisoned.
Yeah.
The isolation, the fear, the constant uncertainty.
In interviews after he was released, Whelan talked about the lasting effects of those years. PTSD, nightmares, how difficult it was to adjust to life outside prison walls.
It's a long, difficult road back from that kind of experience. It takes time, support, and so much courage.
To process what happened, to heal, to rebuild.
It's really remarkable.
He's a strong person, that's for sure.
So resilient.
And it wasn't just the years in prison, right? Don't forget what happened with Brittany Griner. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah, Griner's detention, while awful, it definitely made things even more complicated for Whelan.
It was like he got caught in the middle of this whole other diplomatic mess.
Kind of, yeah. When Griner was detained, it was huge news, right? Put a ton of pressure on the Biden administration to get her back.
Of course. But how did that affect Whelan?
Well, on one hand, it's shone a light on his situation, but not always in a good way, you know? People were talking about him, but there was this feeling of, like, why is she going home and he's not?
Right, like people were being asked to pick which American life was more important. Impossible.
Exactly. And for Whelan, stuck in that labor camp, it must have felt incredibly isolating. He's talked about the moment he found out about Griner's release.
He was still in prison when that happened.
Yep. He got a call, and for a minute, he thought it was for him that he was finally going home.
Oh man, that moment of hope, thinking it was finally over.
And then, bam, it's not for him, he's been left behind. It just shows the mental and emotional toll these situations take, not just on the person in prison, but on their families too. Everyone who loves them.
And the fact that Russia agreed to the deal, releasing Griner for Victor Bout, this guy the U.S. considered a really dangerous arms dealer. What does that tell us?
Russia was playing for keeps. They wanted Bout back, had been trying for years, and they were willing to use Griner as a bargaining chip to make it happen.
So Whelan's freedom, it was always dependent on Russia getting something big in return.
Seems that way, and for a long time, the U.S. just didn't have anything Russia wanted that badly.
Until, of course, they did. And then, boom, this huge development. Whelan is part of a prisoner swap, this time for Evan Gershkovich, that Wall Street Journal reporter who was detained in Russia, accused of espionage.
Sound familiar.
Totally. And again, Russia's demands were steep. This time they wanted concessions from multiple countries, including Germany. They ended up agreeing to release a convicted assassin.
Vadim Krasikov, former FSB agent, serving a life sentence for murder. It was controversial in Germany, but it got Whelan home.
Crazy, right? These situations are never simple. They involve so many countries, all with their own agendas and interests.
And it puts so much pressure on the governments involved. One life versus the risks of releasing a dangerous criminal. Impossible decisions.
So, after years of this, the conditions, the disappointment, the uncertainty, Paul Whelan finally gets on a plane back to freedom in August 2024.
A moment his family and probably a lot of people around the world had been waiting for.
But even then, you have to think about the impact of what he went through, the scars it left on him and everyone who fought so hard to get him back.
His story really makes you think about how precious freedom is and how easily it can be taken away. Even now, the threat of being wrongfully detained, used as a pawn in some big political game, it's real.
It's a scary thought, especially in a world where this kind of thing seems to be happening more and more.
We can't let ourselves become numb to these stories. We have to keep talking about it, shining a light on what's happening, and holding our leaders responsible for protecting their citizens no matter where they are.
It's a call to action for all of us, right? To stay informed, to be engaged, to not look away.
Because, like Paul Whelan's story shows us, this could happen to anyone. The world is complicated and often dangerous. It's up to all of us to fight for a world where freedom is the rule, not the exception.
That's a powerful message, and a good place to wrap up, I think. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Paul Whelan's incredible story.
His experience is a stark reminder of the human cost when governments play these games, the power of family, and the strength of the human spirit.
That's it for today, folks. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, seek out those hidden truths, and keep diving deep.
The more we understand the world, the better equipped we'll be to face its challenges and make it a better place.